What's going on, everyone? So here we are, and yes, this is the very first best Star Wars Unlimited scientifically proven tier list. No one can disagree with it because we have done our research. Of course, this is all in good fun, but let's be honest, guys. We are truly the only correct tier list. Now, how did I come across this idea? Well, for those of you that watch other YouTubers, well, there is one that does some MMORPG content. You might have heard of him, Josh Strife Hayes. He put out a video called Scientifically Proven Tier List for the Best MMORPG. And basically in that video, he scoured the entire internet to find all the YouTube videos ranking MMORPGs. And guess what? I have done the same. Now, I did a little bit of a different thing with this one, but I'll kind of go through what the scientific process actually was because, well, since our game develops over time and there are just new things added into the field of Star Wars Unlimited, I took from set 3 onwards. So only the set 3 videos or videos that were made post set 3 were included, because otherwise, how can you rate the top leaders when they're not even existing in the game? On top of that, I also only included videos that had all the leaders on there, because otherwise some leaders will get a bunch of points and the other leaders won't, just by simply omitting them from their lists. As such, unlike Josh's video, I do not have hundreds of videos to go through. I only have 3 today, including one by myself. And we are having some fun with this because some of them are made pretty recently, like KTODs, but mine was made a little while ago. And so we're going to be averaging together all the rankings from these videos for a good time. And I will say the result here was pretty good. I'm not gonna lie, I kind of agree with most of the positions here. How this works is for every video they have a tier list, and generally it's on Tier Maker, but each one of them has X amount of tiers. For some of them there's like 5, some of them there's 6, and depending on where that leader situated itself on the tier list, it would get an amount of points. If you are sitting in, for example, D tier, you would get 1 point. If you're sitting in S tier, you would get 5 points. If they had 6 tiers, that S tier would have been 6 points and D tier still would have been 1 point. I think you get the picture. As such, every single leader here has been assigned a point value, and we are going to be dropping them on the list from worst to best here today. And so let's get started with our first pick, with a big thank you for my patrons over on Patreon. Thank you for supporting the channel. Thank you for watching the videos. And also I have a TCG player link in the description down below. Let's dive into our first leader here today. As I mentioned, we're going to be going from worst to best. And so we're going to be starting off with the D tier, with our first leader being literally the lowest rated leader on the list. Every single other leader has gotten above a D tier on one person's video or another. Finn has gotten the bottom tier of every single video. He is officially, through the scientific method, the worst leader in Star Wars Unlimited. Bar none. He is the worst, which is absolutely hilarious. Because when you look at him, he's a 5 resource to flip 4/6. Not too bad, to be honest. A little bit above average in terms of size. But it's just this, maybe just tags on him. Like if he was a rebel, maybe you could do something. Maybe just the fact that his ability just absolutely sucks, or what. It's probably just that. And that you have this upgrade defeating synergy that doesn't really work with anything in the game right now besides like Roger. It just doesn't really do a whole lot. We've tried Finn Green, we've tried all sorts of random garbage, and it just doesn't really work. It's okay, you know, you could beat some decks, especially if you're a decent player, but yeah, worst leader in the game. Next up, we've got actually 5 different leaders that are tied with 4 points. So these leaders are on the second, or have gotten a little bit above a D tier on one person's list or another. Starting us off, we've got, and where are you, my friend? Padme. Padme is just above Finn with a total of 4 points. I mean, come on. We expected Padme to be down here. Honestly, I would probably take Padme over Finn, to be honest. I've played with Padme, and the drawing cards, the restore, the fact that she's a 2/7 isn't too bad. I've gotten more use out of Padme's ability than I have with Finn's ability, to be honest. It's a little bit unfortunate. It's a little bit unfortunate because Padme's ability is not good at all. This is really just a representation of a lot of different things of Star Wars Unlimited, but you're not able to keep a lot of units on the battlefield. You're not able to draw cards and do some great things with that. And you're also not really privy to a lot of Republic units. And so Padme's ability just doesn't do a whole lot. And there's a lot better ones out there. Next up, we've got a nice one here. We've got Jyn coming in with 4 points. Not really unexpected, to be honest, but 6 to deploy, a 4/7, not really all that horrible, like decent stat line, right? It's just that her ability, like she doesn't do really anything. Most of the time, you don't have the ability to even use Jyn's action. And even if you do, there's very rare scenarios where this action will actually be able to go ahead and give you that advantage to the point where you are keeping your units and your opponent's unit dies, right? For example, if you're in a Sabine versus Sabine, well, your action will prevent 1 additional damage, but you would have been able to make that trade anyways, even without Jyn. It's really when you're in scenarios where like you have a Battlefield Marine and your opponent has a Battlefield Marine, or you have a Sabine and your opponent has a Battlefield Marine. That's like the only times where Jyn's ability comes into play. It's just not that strong. Besides, Heroism Cunning wants to be aggro, and this ability attacks units. You don't want to be attacking units. That's horrible. Next up, and this is by far, come on guys, this is the worst leader in the game, really, not Finn. But anyways, Hunter coming in at 4 points. I cannot disagree with the scientific method. So even though I am begrudgingly putting Hunter over Finn, I mean, oof. Hunter, guys, this guy is absolute poo-poo. That is why he is in the D tier for today. 7 to deploy, 5/8. What a horrible stat line. Like, Vader has the same stat line. He comes down a turn earlier. It is just absolutely atrocious to see Hunter here. He just doesn't do anything. Like, his draw a card is even worse than Padme's. And you don't even care about drawing cards in the first place, but you also, the spending a resource is still consistent. But instead of like having coordinate and needing a Republic unit, you now need to have a unique unit that would have been in the resource pile, and to have had the unique unit on the battlefield, and to have that unit die so that you can play the card because you just draw that card from your resource pile. Like, it is horrible. It is so bad. There's no surprise with Hunter, I would have to say. And then next up, we've got another one that has been very commonly hated on, and that is Hera. Oh boy, Hera. I really want Hera to be good. Unlike a lot of the other ones on this list where I'm just like, yeah, I don't really care. Hera, I've tried. I've done the 5-color nonsense, especially from set 1. It was one of my earlier videos actually on the channel. She just there's no reason to play Hera. There's just no reason. Like, you don't really want to play all the Spectre units, to be honest, or like Spark Rebellion or Karabast in the same deck. Like Sabine is good, and maybe you can pair Ezra with her and get some value there. But like, do you really want Kanan in your deck too, and Chopper and Zeb? Like, is Zeb even good? Like, it's just the Spectre units are just not that strong overall. Like, Ghost isn't really playable, Chopper isn't really playable, Zeb isn't really playable, Ezra's borderline these days. It's really like Sabine and Kanan as the big 2, but I mean Spark Rebellion as well as an event. But playing them all in the same deck, they do a lot of different things. And even if you do all that, she's still a 6 to deploy 4/6. It doesn't do anything when she comes down. She literally offers nothing other than being someone that you can play all the Spectre units with, and maybe in the future we'll get better ones. I mean, there's the new Sabine, which is a Spectre as well, but yeah, just don't. And then we've got another one here with 4 points. All of these 5 that we've gone over, as I mentioned, have 4 points, and that is Chewy. So Chewy coming in, not surprised with this one, guys. Coming down, is a Sentinel, is a beefy boy, but that's all he's got going for him, really. 2/9 Sentinel, has the grit, can maybe one-shot you. I've tried to play Chewy in like yellow, blue heroism for like this nasty Wookiee style deck, which was pretty fun, but no. Giving Sentinel to 3 cost units, it can be okay, but now we have like Village Protectors, which is already 3 cost Sentinel. I don't know. It's just there's nothing going for Chewy, just like every other leader here in the D tier, really. But that moves us on into the 5-pointers. So we got a couple 5-pointers on this list, 2 to be exact. And the next one is going to be IG88, still in the D tier, because as I am separating these, we're just going to have an even separation of all the leaders. So we are still remaining in the D tier, but with IG88 coming up next. Honestly, I'm a little bit surprised IG made it above these other ones, but that might be my fault, because I know in my video I put him above like Finn and above Hunter and things like that. But IG88 coming in, and yeah, he's an aggro leader. I mean, he's pretty bad. The big thing is a lot of people talk about 4 toughness leaders, and their 4 toughness leaders are bad, right? Like that is a huge downside. But it depends on when you deploy. Like Kylo deploys 4 resources. That's really powerful because oftentimes it's so early in the game to where you can play around your opponent having removal. When you're at 5 resources, there are just so many things that can go ahead and kill your IG, not to mention the units themselves. Like if my opponent plays a K2, it just trades with your IG, which is absolutely nonsense. And it's hard to do the front side thing of IG, which is deploying enough units to actually take advantage of his front side action. But he at least can do some damage, I guess, which is okay. Next up, we've got another one, which I'm not too surprised to see in the D tier, which is Cassian. Now, Cassian's a little bit funny because one of the videos rated this guy a lot higher, and the other 2 are just like, yeah, he's D tier. And I mean, you all know how I feel about Cassian for the most part, but he's done better. He's done better in the planetary qualifiers recently. It's just that Cassian himself, like, can you play that exact same deck, but with Sabine as your leader and perform better? Maybe, probably, most likely, in fact. Cassian, 6 to deploy, 4/6. He got Saboteur, I suppose. Maybe you can draw some cards. Maybe you can get some space going, something like that. I mean, he just doesn't do a whole lot. Like, he is another draw card leader where you have to spend some resources to do so. And he just doesn't really fit the theme that aggression heroism wants to do, generally speaking. So going into the D tier, and not too surprised about that. We've got 2 more leaders to talk about here in the D tier. This next one is going to be tied with a ton of other leaders, to be honest. So we've got a total of, what is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 leaders with a total of 6 points. But the next one is going to be Vizsla. Vizsla coming into the D tier. And mind you, a lot of these points, I'm not arguing with the scientific method, okay? I just went ahead and sorted it, and this is how it came up. So pre-Vizsla, you could say, is C tier as well, or D tier apparently, because they are tied. You do whatever you want, okay? This is how the cards fell, if you will. Pre-Vizsla, D tier. Oh, this guy's pretty bad. He's pretty bad. He doesn't really do a whole lot. I mean, I think I've played a pre-Vizsla deck for a video, and it was like, I didn't even use his action at all. Like, not a single time did I use his action. And that's how I feel oftentimes, is his action is completely worthless unless you're specifically building around that action specifically in a controlling style of deck with like I Am Your Father, or like actually mission briefing and that type of stuff. Even then, it's not doing a whole lot. It's kind of about the flip side for me. 5 resource, 4/6, not a bad body, as we said with Finn, but you can pump him up, which is not bad, and that can be a little bit exciting. But yeah, makes sense why he is in D tier. But we've got one last one to slot into D tier, and oh boy, I know some people are going to be mad about this one. That's going to be our good old friend, Captain Rex. Captain Rex coming into the D tier here. Yeah, not super surprised about that one. We have a D tier Captain Rex. He just doesn't do a lot, guys. I'm sorry. Like, I was excited when you could flip and create a clone trooper too. Don't get me wrong. I was pretty excited, but his frontside action just kind of, if you're using it, that means you're in a bad spot most of the time. His flip side being a 2-6 is just so weak. Like, yes, technically you get 4-8 worth of stats, and if you include Rex's ability, it's 4-9 worth of stats. But it just doesn't play out like that. And the only time I've seen Rex really do anything is like when you're playing Cunning with it, so you can trigger Plo Koon's raid, which is okay. But yeah, Captain Rex in the D tier. We're zooming in as we move on to the C tier with the next one, and that is Nute Gunray, our very first C tier leader. Okay. Some exploit nonsense going on, you know, defeating some things, creating more battle droid tokens. I can see some power here. Not really. I do not like Nute Gunray, but you know, he's in C tier, which I can be okay with. The exploit whole game plan really hasn't shaped up all that well. And it's not just the waylays. It's not just like getting completely decimated by one removal option. It's just that even if you pull off the strategy, there's not a lot of decks where that will just win you the game outright. Like if you go droid deployment into battle droid escort into, you know, invisible hand can't be exploited out. I'm thinking Dooku, but if you go that into some sort of exploit unit like Malevolence and whatnot, oftentimes your opponents can just go ahead and use a combination of like just attacks, Tarkin Town, things like that to finish it off. Like a P38 plus Tarkin Town kills Malevolence. Like it kills it. That's how bad we're talking about right now. And that's just what happens oftentimes, and that's why Nute just doesn't have too many things going on for him. Another one here, we got into the C tier, also tied with 6 points with these other three. Nala Se. I know some people are excited about that. Like, oh my gosh, we could play Vigilance Villainy and we could play all the clones. No way. Give me my records. Give me my techs, and oh my gosh, tech in Vigilance Villainy for no additional resources. It's nuts. And she sucks. She's a 1/7, and 1/7s are trash. And also at the same time, the fact you can heal a little bit doesn't come into play all that often. And who knew that you actually just don't care about playing clones in your control deck? A lot of the clones just don't fit the strategy. Like tech is one of the few, and even then tech's not good in a lot of matchups. And Nala Se, C tier. Next up, we've got our good old friend, where are ya, Mandalorian. Mandalorian, well, unfortunately, he is in C tier. I think this makes a lot of sense. He's a 4/7, not a bad stat line. It's just that the fact that you have to play all like half upgrades and half units in order for you to actually take advantage of Mandalorian's ability is just way too hard to do. The fact that you need to have the upgrade at the right time with the unit at the right time, and your opponent can't have higher HP units, otherwise it doesn't even work, is just way too restrictive and not good enough. And you could see the difference between Mandalorian and like a Jango Fett, right? Jango Fett doesn't need you to use like a combination of things to make his thing work, his ability work to exhaust some stuff. Mando does. And that's why Mando is in C tier, and Jango, well, he's not in C tier. I'll say that much. But that moves us on into the next one with 6 points, and that is going to be Mace Windu. Mace Windu actually taking down a planetary qualifier over, not this last weekend, but the weekend before with Mace Windu Blue. And I spoke a little bit about Mace Windu Blue. I also spoke about Mace Windu Red because I had a whole video on Mace Windu Red, and Mace Windu Red is pretty bad. I would put Mace Windu Red definitely in the C or D tier, but I think Mace Windu Blue's got a lot more going for it, and I might bump it up. But that's not what we are here for, because that is my personal opinion. It is subjective. This rating here is objective, unarguable, and completely correct, and that is the C tier for Mace Windu. 7 to deploy. It got some, interaction with some damaged units, which can do some good work, but not good enough, I suppose. Next up, we've got this hurts my heart. This hurts my heart. Leia Organa in the C tier. The very first video I did on this channel was Leia Red back in set 1, and she was pretty good in set 1. Lots of action cheating actually ended up working. Rebel decks were the way to go, and you could really do some good work. Since then, well, it's not been all Rebels. Poe Dameron and Wrecker are the 2 cards that really make Sabine Green scary alongside ECL. Leia Red can't play ECL. It can play Tarkin Town, which is still pretty good, but it's not as synergistic with Tarkin Town as other decks, and that's probably why she's ending up in the C tier today. But she's actually an S tier. Okay, she S tier for nostalgia. She S tier for nostalgia. But again, subjective. And then the one we got for C tier on top of all these is going to be a Lando. We got Lando coming in with 6 points as well. I have been really unimpressed with Lando. I think the biggest part is like all these smuggle cards, you got to pay extra and then you get a discount, but then you have to pay for that discount by sacrificing a resource. And you don't even get a good card that you smuggled out for doing all that unless it's like a Hotshot Blaster or like the Millennium Falcon, which are 2 good ones. There's very few good smuggle cards. I think that's what makes Lando weak is there's not enough payoffs for his ability. And so his ability doesn't really do anything because of it. Poor Lando. But we've got another one here in C tier, and that is going to be good old Jabba the Hutt. Man, oh man, was I hoping Jabba was going to be good, but nope, he is a C tier deck. And I agree with this. He just requires too many actions. Everything he does is telegraphed. I think that Jabba with just if we had more things that were like, oh, if your opponent has a bounty on one of your units, do X or have this happen, etc., 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 get a shield token, then it would be way better. But because we don't, we only have a couple that do that, suddenly Jabba, you don't even get use out of his second part of his ability, which is getting a resource cost reduction on units that had a bounty that you put on them die. And so Jabba here in the C tier makes a lot of sense. Another one we've got in the C tier, but above Jabba, is Moff Gideon. Oh boy, Moff Gideon. Moff Gideon's bad, okay? Moff Gideon, I have never been a big fan of Moff Gideon. I think the biggest thing with him is the fact that the fact that when you are looking at all the 3 cost units, there's just not enough. Like, you can't just flood the board with 3 or less cost units and expect to win the game. Even decks like Kylo Ren or even like IG are playing 4 resource plays and 5 resource plays, oftentimes either events or something to really push the game into its end game phase. And that's the same thing with Moff Gideon. Yes, you can get some value with some early game units, but you just don't have a way to go the full distance with your leader flip and your ability with Moff Gideon. But lastly, the final one of the C, or not C tier, but of the 6 pointers, I believe, right? Yes, the final one of the 6 pointers is going to be, where are you? Fennec Shand. I can't wait to hear the comment section for Fennec this time. She is in C tier, even despite top 8ing 2 top 8 lists of Fennec. But hey, guys, come on. If you look at the planetary qualifying meta, we got like 2 Fennecs and like 60 Hans or whatever. Like, I don't even know what it is right now, but it's crazy, okay? It's a C tier list, okay? Fennec isn't providing you too much in the list. It is okay. It is okay. The ambushes are okay. But let's be honest, guys. Let's just play Sabine Yellow and do better, right? Yes, Fennec has Tarkin Town, which is good. Don't get me wrong. It is good. But Sabine Yellow, I think, is still even better, despite not having access to Tarkin Town. And if you want to rate just leaders in of themselves, ooh, you put Fennec in the trash pretty much, because she does not really do a whole lot. You get some value with her ambush really early on, or on the really early on units. And then as we get into the late game, it gets a lot less likely for you to get use out of that ability oftentimes. I know I've clowned on Fennec a lot. She's really not terrible. I've played a few games. I do think she's decent, but I also think that that's a lot of just the rebel heroism synergy. She's a C tier, guys. Let's be honest. But that puts us into the 7-pointers, and we've got 5 total 7-pointers. Starting us off with a good old Thrawn into the C tier with 7 points. And again, some of these, because of the way the list goes, are going to be in the B tier, but that's just the scientific method, okay, guys? You just have to accept it. This is objectively correct, okay? Objectively. And that is Thrawn is in the C tier, but at the top end, apparently this guy's pretty good at controlling the board, and that is exactly what you're trying to be doing with Thrawn. Stalling out your opponents, but you have to pay some resources to do so. But you could play the Supreme Strategist strategy and look at all your opponent's cards, really, or at least half of them, and see what they're doing with their hand and deck potentially, which is kind of fun. Still C tier, not quite good enough at controlling to be a B, A, or S tier list, but still okay. And then the final one for C tier, the very final one, is Maul. And I know some people are going to be mad about this one because Maul is one of a lot of people's favorites. But turns out 6 to deploy 6/6 is not good enough. And giving random units overwhelm, also not good enough. Therefore, Maul, not good enough. He's C tier. He can do some fun things. Still Force Throw plus Overwhelming Barrage when Maul comes down is still pretty good. 8 damage Overwhelming Barrage and a Force Throw is really going to wipe the board for your opponent. But outside of something cool like that, he just dies very quickly. And, the 6 power isn't quite enough to carry him. But that's going to be C tier. Let's move on to the B tier. And starting us off, we've got Grievous in the B tier. How did Grievous manage to get this high on the list? I don't know, but it is proven right here and right now for you all. Grievous in the B tier. Soulless One. Soulless One's pretty good. Attack it in for 3. Grievous, the droids. Throwing droids in front of people. Ooh, those Sentinels. You just can't fight through it. I mean, he is a 4/8. For 6, which is a good stat line. Maybe he's the big boss. I mean, you could play Grievous like you can Grievous and like 2 Grievouses on the back. That's crazy stuff. I mean, B tier makes a lot of sense. But then we've got the next one, which is Bo-Katan. Bo-Katan, okay, now that's a respectable B tier. I think she's right in the midst of things. B tier for Bo-Katan makes a lot of sense. Getting that 1 damage ping off every once in a while with those attacks from your Mandos. Got a lot more Mandos now. It's actually not too bad. Pretty nice. Coming down as a 4/7, maybe with the Darksaber, pumping up all your Mandalorians. Just being an 8/10 with the Darksaber is kind of a lot to deal with. And if you do have, as I mentioned, those Mandalorians, you start to deal 2 damage to things on attack. Like, you get the Vader ability and you get to be as big, if not bigger than Vader because of the Darksaber. There are a lot of things that can work with Bo-Katan. I generally like to play Bo-Katan Blue. I thought that was pretty sweet. But I've seen some Bo-Katan Double Reds. And heck, we even saw it perform pretty well in set 2. But Bo-Katan, guys. Bo-Katan. And then lastly, in terms of our 7-pointers, we've got Dr. Aphra coming into the B tier. Nice little 2/5 body, but can come up to a 5/5 with 5 to flip if you do have those properly displaced cards in your discard pile. But really nothing on the front side. Yes, you can start milling your own deck every single turn, which is not, particularly useful, but generally people are playing bounty hunter crews, they're playing restocks, they're playing maybe some street gang recruiters, they're playing those types of cards, maybe even a Palpatine's Return if you're going into green. Generally not, because you're playing a little bit more of a hard control strategy with Dr. Aphra. But if you find yourself as Dr. Aphra playing up against more controlling decks, you're gonna win, because if you are playing bounty hunter crew and restock and all of this stuff, and search your feelings, and like being able to find all the cards you need because you're going through your deck so much quicker than your opponent, that's where Dr. Aphra shines. But that puts us into the 8-point range. And starting us off with 8 points, we've got Wat Tambor. Wat Tambor making it into the B tier as well. You all saw my video with a bunch of the small units being able to attack for 1,000,000 points of damage. It is a pretty fun list, and I do think that's probably the best direction to go with Wat Tambor. This card is just really good in terms of trying to make every unit on the board a threat, and that is really its strength. You have 6 units on the battlefield. They're all a bunch of 1/1s, but then your opponent kills one of them, and suddenly the other one turns into a 3/1, which doubles the damage that you can potentially do, because assuming your opponent kills another unit, since you use an action, maybe, but triples the damage that you can do if you just consider the 1 power initially. Wat Tambor doing some work because of that. Next up, we've got Vader. Now, this to me is like a perfectly represented B tier leader. I found him to be a lot better in set 1 and set 2. With set 3, we've got a lot more aggressive decks, and that pushes just oftentimes a lot of the leaders that are more expensive out of the meta. That's just kind of what happens, and Vader is no different. He's just a little bit too slow, and ECL is just a little bit too little amount of HP, and that puts him in the B tier because he can't quite consistently beat those aggro decks, and well, he doesn't go big enough than things like Palpatine to actually compete with those either. Next up, we've got Tarkin in, that's Grand Inquisitor. Let's put that one back. Tarkin in B tier as well, sitting itself pretty next to Darth Vader, a little bit ahead, which I think makes a lot of sense. We've seen some Tarkin blues, but mainly Tarkin yellow has been the flavor of choice of Tarkin, generally speaking. And it's pretty good. I mean, Tarkin yellow with triple arc raid, you got your Imperial synergies, you got your TIE Phantoms, which are the best cards in your deck, really. And you just go to town, hit your opponent, hopefully you win, and if you don't, then you lose, which pretty much sums up Tarkin. Yeah, don't lose. But then we've got Grand Inquisitor. Grand Inquisitor coming in above Tarkin. This was a shocker. I didn't think we all enjoyed Grand Inquisitor as much as we did, but it makes a little bit of sense because he does have a lot of potential, and he is quite strong at going ahead and using the grit synergies with him, or if you want to go the combo route using yellow, although I think it's a little bit more inconsistent. I think just the grit power from Grand Inquisitor is really nice. Things like Sidara Sand, things like Warshare Tree Tender, things like Deathwatch Loyalist, all that type of stuff are really good with Grand Inquisitor, and you can punch in a lot of damage. Above Grand Inquisitor, we've got Gar Saxon. And where are you, Gar Saxon? This guy has been pretty good. Honestly, I have been playing him more and more. If you hadn't seen lately the Planetary Qualifier, there is a Gar Saxon yellow that actually won one of the Planetary Qualifiers, which is absolutely insane, by the way. And Gar Saxon yellow is by far the best Gar Saxon deck that I found from set 2. And he really didn't change from set 3, which is why I hadn't returned to him. But after seeing that Planetary Qualifier, my goodness, guys, couple new additions in Breaking In and like Perilous Position and cards like that, other removal options. But Gar Saxon yellow doing some work and getting into the higher portion of B tier, which is pretty impressive. And then on top of that one, we've got Ahsoka Tano coming in above Gar Saxon. The fact that she's in B tier is a little bit crazy to me. She just doesn't really do much besides giving you a little bit extra power. It's kind of like an IG on the front side where you really want those 3 units and probably more than your opponent, and you'll get an extra damage. On the flip side, she does turn into a 3/6 with the potential of being a 5/6, and since she's flipping, you'll have 1 unit guaranteed. So just 2 other units and she becomes a 5/6, which is a lot bigger, granted, and I think that's what makes her a little bit more interesting. The times that I've played Ahsoka, I've been pretty unimpressed with her, to be honest, and I think I would rather just play Sabine. And to be honest, that's a lot of leaders on this list. Like, I think I'd just rather play something higher up on the list so far. But that's going to wrap up all the 8-pointers. We move on to our first 9-point leader. These ones are going to be pretty high up there. We're starting to get to the higher amount of point totals. And the person who gets to start that off is going to be Obi Obi-Wan Kenobi. Seeing him so high up on the list is a little bit surprising, but so many people have enjoyed Obi-Wan, and he does have some nice things going for him, like all the different decks like Cad Bane and Django, and all the decks that just kind of randomly dish out damage as you're going through the game. Heal, which could be pretty obnoxious. You got a lot of control oftentimes, or you're going with a more rampy route with like Obi-Wan Green, which could be pretty good. But seeing him in B tier this high up is quite surprising. So thank you for being able to go ahead and, well, rank all these leaders here with all your videos. And now we know that Obi-Wan is scientifically better than the ones below it, which I had not known before. So that's great. And next up, we've got Iden, one of the quintessential control leaders. Definitely has dropped off a little bit with the Bosks, with the Palp Blues, the Cad Blues, even the Django Blues. Honestly, Iden has just gotten maybe just a little bit less exciting just because her ability is healing. I'm not sure. She's also a 4/4 for 6. She has shield, which is not bad, but the body is not great. The ability is not great. And overall, she's not great. And then we get to move on to the A tier. And to start us off in the A tier, you notice at the bottom we might have a few that might be a little sus. Hondo. That's right. Hondo in the A tier. He's that good, guys. He is just that good of a leader. Now, to be honest, okay, Hondo's leader ability isn't too bad. You know, getting some extra value from all those smuggling options that you got isn't too bad. But what are you? Where are you seeing Hondo? What is Hondo? Is it even a deck? Are we ever like what happened to Hondo Blue? Doesn't exist anymore. It does. It's just not as good. Or is it? Apparently it is. It's A tier. It's we should be playing Hondo Blue. That's what we're finding out. Hondo Blue. I don't really know how it got this high. Honestly, I tried to put it lower. Of the 9 pointers, which Kenobi, Iden, Hondo, and the next one we're going to talk about. I am rating this one, at least my video, rated at the lowest out of all the videos, and so I tried, but you know, I can't disagree with the science. I cannot disagree with the science, and he is an A tier leader. That's right, he's A tier. And then we've got the last 9 pointer. Chirrut. Chirrut's in the A tier. Chirrut is the A tier leader. He is A tier, guys. How? I don't even know. I don't even know how Chirrut got up here. Chirrut doesn't exist anymore either. What are these leaders doing up here? Honestly, I don't even know, though, because if I look back at some of these leaders, like, I don't know if I would put things above Hondo or Chirrut either of the rest of the list. It's crazy. This scientific method's working perfectly because I'm looking at it, I'm like, who would I put above Hondo or Chirrut? Maybe Iden, yeah. I mean, maybe like Tarkin, yeah. Maybe like where's the modem dial-up sound right now? I don't know. But oh my gosh, I mean, there Chirrut. He's a 3/5, but he's Force, I guess. Put a Shadowed Intentions on this guy and go to town. But also, that doesn't really work. He just dies. And Shadowed Intentions is not actually that good. It's a bad card. That's what we found out, guys. On to the next one. Into our 10 pointers, guys. Starting us off with our 10 pointers, we got a fat chonker here on the screen. We got Chancellor Palpatine with set 3. Chancellor Palpatine, space deck. Yes, all space, all Tarkin Town. Coming in and smacking people. That is right. Chancellor Palpatine coming into the A tier. I honestly, I've tried Palpatine. He's okay, but nowadays people know what Palpatine's all about. And if you don't get that flip starting, it's not going to happen and you're going to die. And I mean, your base is going to blow up. That's what I meant. But, you know, that's Palpatine, A tier. All right. Next up, we've got Luke coming into the A tier. Honestly, of the ones that we talked about in the A tier so far, honestly, Luke, I can be okay with. I can be okay with it. 4/7 body's not too bad. You got a shield token on attack. I mean, what's not to like? You know, he's a force unit. Ooh, pretty good. He's a rebel. Ooh, even better, right? Who knew that? Who knew he was a rebel? That's pretty sweet. But his frontside action leaves a little bit to be desired. Really wish you could just do it to any unit, not just the ones you could play, heroism units you play that phase. But still, can get a little bit of value. And nothing like an old Yoda with a shield token, huh? Kind of annoying. Kind of annoying. Next up, we've got, a fan favorite and a personal favorite of mine, Kylo Ren. And here's where we start getting into some of the juicy ones. Kylo Ren up into the A tier. Now, one person's video, they tried to get it down into the lower tiers, but we revived it and he jumps into the A tier. I love some good Kylo up in here. Turn 3 wins, love that. He's even top 8'd at this point in some of the planetary qualifiers as far as I remember. So I mean, Kylo doing some work, and I mean, it makes sense. Nice aggressive leader. He is like the biggest aggro check leader of any leader in the entire game. Like Sabine, yes, but like Kylo is even more aggressive, and you could even race Sabine as Kylo. That's how aggressive you are. And yeah, it happens. It absolutely happens. Heck, if you put a Darksaber on your Sabine, you are only 2 points of power higher than Kylo at his peak, which is crazy. Well, 1 point of power plus the 1 damage from Sabine, so attacking for 2 points of power more, which is crazy. If you put like a Fallen Lightsaber on Kylo, suddenly you're a point of higher than Sabine, which is pretty nice. So lots and lots of stuff going for Mr. Kylo Ren here. Next up, we've got Krennic. Krennic coming into the A tier. Honestly, I would rate Krennic a little bit better than Iden as well. So, you know, a little bit more value in the soft control field of things. So him being in the A tier makes a good amount of sense. And, well, Krennic being A tier is just fitting. It's just fitting. He was solid in set 1, solid in set 2. He's still solid. Restore 2 is obnoxious on a body, on a leader. 2/7 becomes a 3x usually. Kind of obnoxious to deal with, but you kind of have to. Otherwise the Restore 2 is just going to completely drown you. And that's exactly what Krennic does. So good stuff with Krennic. Another 10-point leader here above Krennic. Above Krennic, we've got Count Dooku. How Count Dooku snuck in here, I have no idea. But Count Dooku in A tier, guys. Just wait until we get the next set with the new invisible hand. He is going to slap, right? We've got more Separatists coming. The more Separatists that we get, honestly, the more valuable I see Count Dooku being. I think this is a symptom of just not having enough Separatist units as to where we see him. Otherwise, he'd be mega S tier. Right now, he's just a lowly high A tier. Lowly high A tier, which is totally fine. But lots of value to be had with some of the exploiting out Separatist units. Him being a 5/9 on 7 resources is just an absolute slap in the face to Hunter, who's sitting there as a 5/8 and has a weak ability. Like he just doesn't do anything. So yeah, teach that Hunter a lesson, Count Dooku, and make it snappy. Next up and last of our 10 pointers, we've got Boba 2. So Boba from the second set, the King Daimyo Boba, 6 to deploy, 4/7, works with keywords, which is really, really sweet. Makes your things like modded cohort be ambushing out as 5 power worth of power because of the Boba Fett, or pumping up something else. You got things like Cloud Rider that can attack for 4 because of the ambush. We've got things like Plo Koon, which is insane, by the way, attacking as a 7 power ambusher, assuming you've got 2 other units on the board. Now that is crazy. And I will say Boba did get a big buff in set 3 with the Cunning Heroism buff overall. And that's kind of what put Boba on the map a little bit more. And honestly, I'm not too surprised, not too unhappy to see Boba Fett a little bit higher up on the list. But A tier, okay, maybe we are underrating Boba, guys. Come on now. And then next, and first one of the 11 pointers, and we've got 2 11 pointers here, is Yoda. So Yoda making it up into the A tier. I think this makes a lot of sense. We're seeing actually more and more Yoda show up in these planetary qualifiers of all different shapes and sizes. We've got like Yoda reds, I believe some Yoda greens. I'm not sure if Yoda blue or Yoda yellow have shown up yet. But definitely a very interesting dynamic for Yoda. I think the biggest thing with Yoda is that we're missing that heroism control payoff, that Avenger-esque card, as well as, that's one part. And the other part is a Super Laser Blast in Heroism. That type of effect where you can wipe the board clean and play your control strategy. That's where Yoda really, really wants to be oftentimes. Instead, it ends up being more of a combo deck that we've seen it. Valuing like the Force Throws or playing like Yoda Yellow and like You're My Only Hopes and things like that. Now there are 2 of them. Take it down some really massive plays a little bit early on. But that's going to be Yoda. And the other 11-pointer is Asajj. And actually, we've been seeing quite a few Asajj Reds show up in the top spots of planetary qualifiers. I think there was either 2 or 3 of them already as of recording this video. And, well, Asajj putting up some numbers, okay? Putting up some numbers. I think it's pretty cool to see. She is kind of obnoxious, right? If you do get like that triple dark raid into a Ruthless Raider on the Asajj flip turn, suddenly you get to, if you have another unit, trigger Asajj's ability, so deal another damage. You get to get in with Asajj and deal 4 damage on the attack, which is nice. So you get a total of 5 points of damage from Asajj herself, and you get the triple dark raid attack with the Ruthless Raider, which is 4, plus you get the 2 damage when it enters, which is 6. That's a total of 11 damage on a base, which is pretty powerful. And that's, again, assuming that you don't have any other units, or you only have 1 other unit. If you get more, like that's crazy. It can get pretty crazy pretty quickly. But that's gonna be not quite A tier. We've got 1 more to talk about. 1 more here in the AA tier, and that's going to be Quinlan. Quinlan coming up and into the A tier here today. We've got a pretty nice little tempo deck. This is definitely a list that has popped up more with the planetary qualifiers, and I think the reasoning as to why it's lower on the list, we've talked a lot about other leaders and how they're higher up on the list than they probably should be, but the reason why Quinlan is as low as it is more so because some of the videos were made prior to some of the planetary qualifier, but don't worry, scientific method, it's true. He's A tier. He's not better. He's not S tier. Tempo advantage, 3/7 force body, not bad. Coming down on 5. User, really, really excellent user of Tarkin Town, getting some units cleared out early on. That's Quinlan. And now we get to talk about some S tier, the actual good leaders, the good ones today. And now we get to the real good stuff. We got the S tier as of right now. Indisputable. Starting us off with Palpatine. OG Palp. Of course, the quintessential ramp deck, the late game mastermind, and all around just absolutely menace to deal with. 410 stat line, interesting ability / on attack trigger where you can potentially do some massive work by stealing your opponent's units. Palpatine Yellow, I'd say by far the biggest contender here, but really it's just Palpatine in general is this late game insurance plan. The ability to go out and flip and steal something, ooh baby, that's some good stuff. And that's going to swing a game, especially if you're able to steal something impactful like a Luke Skywalker or a reinforcement walker or even a crate dragon, right? But honestly, even if you're stealing something like a K2, something in the middle of the pack range, that's still going to be a game changer. And Palpatine certifying himself as an S tier deck. Following that up, we've got Rey in the S tier as well. And I'll say, guys, I mean, all the decks so far in the S tier makes sense. I mean, Rey, we've seen her kind of as a counterpart to Anakin Blue, but Rey Red being that kind of more early game / value focused engine where we have Tarkin Town, which is really, really nice to compete in that early game, but also just having Restore 3 on your leader is pretty nasty. It is pretty nasty. It allows you to do so many different things to survive because your opponent has to deal with Rey, not because she's a super big threat. She ends up being a 3/7 on attacks, but because she has that Restore 3 every single turn, it gets oppressive real quick. And then we've got Qi'ra coming in the S tier as well. Now, unlike Palpatine, generally Palpatine is yellow. Qi'ra ends up running command as its secondary. This is your soft / more mid-rangey, villainy, vigilance command deck that we are all so used to. We got Ramp to get us into our Avengers, our Darth Vaders. We have our Darth Vaders, which are absolutely absurd. We've got Avengers in the late game. It is all about getting to that mid to late game, getting our threats down that absolutely decimate our opponents. Like, your opponent plays a Luke Skywalker. Sure, you can play your Luke Skywalker. We play a Vader, and we get 2 bodies. We get to kill things, etc., etc., etc. Generally, our villainy threats are just a little bit stronger, a little bit more versatile since we have the Mauls and the Vaders, and we got the Avengers. It is a late game insurance plan, and Qi'ra does excellent at that. Now, she is a 0-8, which is interesting, but she does have that interesting when played ability to kind of be this event. So that's really sweet. And I mean, Qi'ra coming in as an S tier list, I think, is pretty reasonable. And then we've got a brand new up-and-comer Anakin into the S tier. Brand new from set 3. He is a lot better than I think a lot of people expected. I know for me, when I was rating this guy early on, I put him closer to the top of my tier list in the A tier because I was expecting him to be a little bit better. And he was. The big thing is, you play a more of a soft control deck where you have the heroism, vigilance combination of like Luke Skywalker, some removal, redemption potentially, even some crate dragons oftentimes. And you use these units that normally wouldn't be that great, like R2, to become 3/4s instead of 1/4s, and you're instantly trading up on all of your units. And so the 2 damage you're taking from your action actually ends up gaining you life because you didn't want to take a hit from Battlefield Marine. Use your action, your R2 survives, and their Battlefield Marine is gone. That's the type of scenario where Anakin just really strives in. Things like Concord Dawn Interceptors being a Sentinel, but now a 3-power attacker into their units. And on top of all of that, we have Anakin as an absolute menacing finisher, especially if you get a Jedi lightsaber on him, where he can oftentimes be a 7/7 when he deploys with Overwhelm. So you not only get to remove their units, but also kill them, which is really nice. On the next one we go, we've got Jango Fett into the S tier, and my goodness, into the S tier he goes, and really sweet to see him up here. Another up-and-comer here with set 3. I'll be honest, guys, my video here rating sub lists was a little bit earlier on into set 3, and I definitely snuffed Jango. He'd probably be higher on the list if not for that. All of the ones that we talked about so far are actually up in 13 points, by the way, except for Palpatine, who took 12 points. But Jango Fett, absolutely master of the tempo early game plan. Really dominating the early game with Tarkin Town and just direct damage at things. I'd say if there wasn't P38 in set 3, I think Jango Fett would literally drop a full tier. P38 is just so excellent for Jango. The ability to be that exhausting potential unit where it comes down, you get to exhaust something, but also triggering just that 1 damage for Tarkin Town and on death. So not only do you get that immediate exhaust, but you also get that exhaust if it decides to die or if it does die. Well, also being a 3/2 is just absolutely absurd. But in general, there's just a lot of units in Jango Fett that kind of do what you're looking to do. Trading your early game trash units like your Greedos or your ISB agents, playing things like ISB agent to get that exhaust. It turns out just preventing your opponent from killing your units and playing that space game plan with Triple Dark Raid is really strong, and Jango does it well. And then we move on to an old classic, Han 2. So new Hans from set 2. I say new Han, but we're gonna have to change that terminology real quick because set 4 is coming with another new Han. But set 2 Han here with the resource discount on every single thing is really strong. We saw this with set 2 all the time. Playing the heroism game plan of getting your Luke down on turn 5 instead of turn 6 is absolutely crazy. Getting the ability to play Crate Dragons for 8 resources, but also like even something as simple as like a K2SO on turn 2, a Kanan on turn 2, a 3-cost unit on turn 1, and that guaranteed ability to play all those things with that resource discount with that ability on the front side of Han is absolutely absurd. Now, with set 3, there's been a lot of Tarkin Towns running around, and Tarkin Town's pretty good against Han Solo. So just something to keep in mind, but I think he still probably would end up as like an A or S tier list. Still nice to see him up high in the rankings. Next up, we've got a good one as well, and that is Cad Bane. Cad Bane in the top 4 of the decks. Objectively one of the best decks in the format, and this is absolutely true. This guy just works super well with one of the brand new cards from set 3. Now there are 2 of them. So now there are 2 of them. Really hadn't found a home, mainly because it's so restrictive in a lot of the other decks. However, Cad Bane, what does it want to do? It wants to play Underworld cards. Every single card in your deck wants to be an Underworld card, and that is perfect for now there are 2 of them, because you also, with Underworld, have some of the best 2 resource plays in the game that you just want to play regardless of being Underworld synergy or not. But because of that, we have things like Bazine, you've got Mercenary Gunship, Cartel Spacer, Crafty Smuggler, all 2 resource plays, which allow you to instantly curve into some of the best 5 resource plays like Bosk and Zuckuss, with now there are 2 of them, and it's absolutely crazy. And guess what? They're all Underworld cards, which triggers Cad Bane's ability, which gets good with Tarkhan Town. I'll say that much. So Cad Bane coming into the S tier makes a lot of sense. And now we move on to the top 3, starting us off with Bosk. One of the best decks in the format, assuredly. Definitely the quintessential hard control deck. The deck that we really look to as, can you beat hard control? Bosk is that player. He is a really nice body as a 4/6, coming down on 5 resources, which does help a lot to mellow out the game. With being a hard control list, you're able to actually trade off early, which is nice. But also just the front side action conjoined with the bounties that you're playing just does a lot of work. You play a death mark, you play a top target, you get to crush out opponents' units really, really quickly by just slowly dealing 1 damage to them every single time, which is really, really nice. And that gives you a lot of value while also refilling your hand. And then, of course, you finish out the game with your Snokes, your Avengers. It's just really, really good. You get basically free removal on the front side, early game flip to even the game plan with your opponent's decks if they're a little bit more aggressive, and then you just outvalue them in late game because villainy vigilance is insane. But I will note, Bosk received 15 points. So Jingo, Hantu, and Cad received 14 points. There's a step up into Bosk. And then we have the final 2 lists, which received the full 16 points on every single tier list. They are in the number 1 spots or in the S tier, unlike Bosk or Cad Bane. And then we got to drop them into the top 2, starting us off with Sabine. Sabine being the number 2 deck on the list. Again, these are 16 points each, but in terms of the way the tier list was sorted, we have Sabine getting snuffed into the 2nd place. But objectively, being the 2nd place deck makes a lot of sense, especially with the planetary qualifier results as of right now. We have definitely Han Yellow taking the number 1 spot, and I'll just put him up here because, of course, there's only 1 deck. Boba Fett, we could put at the very, very bottom because, well, he's banned, so no one had him on his list. But Han here, absolutely, and Sabine making the number 1 and number 2 spots just makes a lot of sense, right? And I'll zoom in here for you all to see a little bit of a closer up of the tier list. Sabine Green is just the quintessential aggro deck. Can you beat a very aggressive curve out, but then also deal with the mid-game comeback of Sabine? I think that's the really interesting part about Sabine is you need to be able to deal with the aggressive start because you will be faced with an aggressive start. A-Wing into Fleet Lieutenant, A-Wing into Wing Leader, Sabine into Fleet Lieutenant, Sabine into Wing Leader, the Battlefield Marine, all that type of stuff always happens in Sabine, and you need to be able to deal with all that. And then you turn into, on turn 3, where you have Darksabers and K2SOs and things like that, which really spike the damage, right? Sabine can hit for 7 points of damage. That's oftentimes a 1/4 of your life total in a lot of matchups, maybe even more if you're fighting against like Tarkhan Town, right? But at that point, okay, yeah, you dealt with all that, but can you deal with an ECL Podameron to completely wreck your game plan and an ECL Wrecker to get in for 6 and have a 7/6 or 7-2 on the battlefield while also removing one of your units? Can you? Probably not. And that's what makes Sabine Green so powerful is there's 2 dynamics where she attacks on. The aggro front and the ability to just completely decimate that mid game with the ECL. And that's what makes Sabine Green so scary. Han, on the other hand, is completely different access. We are accelerating into more higher power, higher value drops that are also disruptive. Turn 1 Bodhi, turn 1 Ezra's to potentially, get some cards in the top of the deck to be played. But then we also have things like Cantina Bouncer, Kira, these types of cards, which bounce, disrupt your opponent's hand. Plo Koon's coming down, ambushing. Plo Koon was in a massive addition. And then to top it all off, we have arguably the strongest 2-card combo in the entire game, which is the Tech DJ coming out on that 5 resources to steal your resource, and with Han being able to permanently steal that resource, which is absolutely amazing. So completely disrupt some of these decks, like Anakin Blue. Ooh, that matchup is disgusting because your opponent basically can never get to their Anakin flip if you get that Tech DJ combo out, which is really, really nice. With the addition of some new 7 resource plays like Enfys Nest alongside that old Han, well, we have attacking on ground with the Ambusher or just bouncing your units continuously. And then you just get slowly whittled down with like your 2/2s or the 3/5s or the 3/4s that Han has. But because you're getting disrupted all the way up the curve, you actually don't have any way to answer it. And then, of course, again, that Han Solo 7 turn with turn 4, you got 5 resources, maybe even more, depending on if DJ came out, right, a little bit earlier. But turn 4, you got that 5 resources. You get Han Solo down with that resource action. Flip Han, attack, 7 resource turn on turn 4 is absolutely nuts. And it makes sense why Han Yellow takes the #1 deck of the format. And also in terms of PQ results, Han and Sabine are #1 and #2. So makes a lot of sense. But what are the final thoughts? What do we say about this list? Well, honestly, we objectively can't say too much because it is objectively correct. It is undisputed best leaders #1 to #54, I suppose, since we're going to include Boba, but Boba's at the very bottom because he is banned. But every single other leader, you can't argue with it. You just can't. Sorry. I wish I could, to be honest. I wish I could, but I can't. On a real note, I think this is pretty fair. I think it's pretty fair. If you look at the S tier, the top 5 lists, I would probably agree with most of them. The only one I would swap is like instead of Han being in the top 5, Jango being in the top 5. I think #1 and #2 are clearly Sabine and Han. And then when it comes to 3 through 5, I think it is a mix of Jango, Cad Bane, and Bossk. But I do think the rest of the S tier makes sense. Like I would put, I should take that back. I would actually probably drop Jango or Cad Bane of the top 5, or Bossk, depending on how you view these decks, and put Quinlan up there, because I do think Quinlan is #3. I think that's probably the biggest egregious deck in the S tier is Quinlan isn't up there right now. But every other list, I think, is pretty fair to put in the S tier. When it comes down to the A tier, I think there's a couple that stand out as probably not A tier. I think Count Dooku, Asajj Ventress, probably Chirrut and Hondo shouldn't be in the A tier. But I think all the other ones are pretty fair. It is worth noting that in my tier lists, my S tier would not be this big. I am evenly distributing all decks across the tiers, which is why we have such a big S tier. And that means that a lot of these other decks would be more A tier. In the B tier, I think this is pretty fair as well. I would probably drop Grievous, Aphra, Wat, Grand Inquisitor, Obi-Wan into the C tier most likely, and some of these A tier decks would be dropped into the B tier. But I didn't think any of the B tier decks should go up. I don't think any of the B tier decks should go up besides maybe Iden, and even that's pushing it. In the C tier, I think this is also pretty fair. I would actually keep most of these decks in C tier for the most part. Fennec, maybe you bump up just because of the strength of cunning, aggression, heroism, maybe into the B tier. Same with like Leia. I think just like green, red, aggressive heroism is just that strong. So I think it's, maybe worth putting in the B tier. As for the D tier, I think every single list makes sense here. Like every single list makes sense. You could argue that Cassidy should be C tier for the same reason that Fennec should be B tier. That's about it. And honestly, if you wanted to swap Nute Gunray into the D tier and put Cassidy into the C tier, I'd be fine with that. But I think as of like the C and D tier, most of these lists, I wouldn't change at all. Maybe Mace Windu, I suppose, if you want to do a little shout out to Mace Windu Blue, who actually won a planetary qualifier. But I don't actually think the deck is that great. I think it is probably B tier. So that's another one that should change. But overall, I mean, averaging all the lists together, and mind you, some of these lists are a little bit crazy, right? Some of these lists have some leaders that I would never dream of putting so low. Jango in B tier. Who did that? Not me, by any means. It wasn't me. I promise it wasn't me. But you get the point, right? I think this is a pretty fair list, scientifically proven. Cannot argue with it. Thanks for watching, everyone. Let me know your thoughts on the comment section down below, and I will see you all for a video soon.